Isn't she the one who botched basic recon? I wouldn't even trust her to carry my gear, let alone command a unit. The snickering didn't let up, not even when she slowly rolled up her sleeve. A strange black ink tattoo partially veiled by grime emerged. The room froze. One man, General Myron Keene, rose to his feet. His tone dropped low. Where did you get that mark? Ever seen silence strike harder than a shout? What followed was a moment you don't forget. Redmond Base sat like a slab of concrete on the Texas plains, remote and ruthless. Morning bugle calls echoed through the barracks where gossip spread like fire through dry brush. Today's subject, Sergeant Nina Rohr, 29, shoulders set like stone beneath suspicion's weight. She moved through the base like a memory no one wanted to remember. The murmurs tailed her constantly in corridors, over meals at the training grounds. Always the same tale, bent and reshaped until fact was a stranger. Heard she abandoned her squad in Syria, Private Dawson mumbled during the morning lineup. Froze and got 3 of her men shot. My guy in Delta says she's been busted down twice. Another chimed in. They say command keeps her on out of sympathy. The rumors gained speed like a rock slide. Each version heavier, more embarrassing than the last. The truth buried deep in sealed files no longer mattered. PT kicked off at 060. Ropes, walls, endurance drills. Now tackle them all with cold efficiency, but no one got close. Invisible walls made of rumors and shame held strong. Need help with that rope, reject? Corporal Voss taunted as she approached. Wouldn't want you freezing mid-climb again. A ripple of chuckles swept through the squad. Not cruel, just careless. The kind of laughter that turns people into punchlines. Nina had become a walking warning label. She said nothing, hadn't for a long while. Back when the investigation twisted her testimony into failure, she'd learned silence was safer. It became her armor, though it did little to deflect the daily judgment. During gear check, she shrugged off her jacket, going through the motions until someone noticed. What's that on your arm? Private Ortega squinted. A tattoo. Sharp dark ink etched into skin somewhere between art and code. Shapes built like geometry and forged with purpose. Framing what looked like a phoenix. But it wasn't quite right. Sharper angles, calculated design. It looked more like classified insignia than body art. Ortega raised his phone, snapped a picture before Nina could pull her sleeve back down. Within minutes, the image was all over chats and inboxes. Just more fuel for the barracks jury. Lieutenant Carter, young and ambitious, spotted the ink during checks. There was something about it that stirred a memory, though he couldn't place it. Military emblems weren't his forte, and asking might reveal more ignorance than curiosity. That's some piece of ink, Sergeant, he remarked. Got a story behind it? For the first time in weeks, Nina met someone's eyes. Something like that, sir? Her voice flat, offering nothing, just a nod and retreat. Carter gave a stiff nod and moved along, but the image stayed with him. He'd seen that design before, somewhere that mattered, something off limits. The day rolled on with its usual quiet cruelty. Water bottles conveniently misplaced in her path during breaks, left out of every casual talk about weekend plans. A low-grade, persistent signal that she no longer belonged among those who trusted each other with their lives. At lunch, she sat alone at the far end of the mesh hall, quietly eating MRE rations while the chatter of others passed her by like she wasn't there. She was cut off now, socially, professionally, emotionally. 2 years of honorable service erased by whispered suspicion and red tape apathy. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Saw that ink online, bold pic. She erased the message without replying. That symbol wasn't for display. It was meant to remind her of what couldn't be told. Some truths are meant to stay hidden, even if hiding them threatens to bury the person carrying them. But sometimes even long-buried things claw back to the surface and someone out there sees what others miss. If you believe these kinds of stories deserve a voice, follow Old Bill's tales because silence never gets the last word. The past lived on in sealed documents beyond reach. But Nina Rohr wasn't just any soldier. She just couldn't prove that anymore. A year and a half back, she'd gone by a different name with a different identity. Operation Phoenix variant demanded total erasure. No records, no history, no trace. Tier 6 ops required everything to vanish, including the people behind them. They'd gone into the triangle of death so lethal it was marked red on every map. 7 operators tasked with pulling out a political prisoner whose survival put multiple nations on edge. Intel said the op was suicide dressed up as strategy. But someone had to step forward. Her team came from the best across every service branch. No paperwork, no safety net, no plan B. If they failed, they'd disappear like smoke. No names left behind. Families told it was training deaths. Their insertion went without a hitch. 12 hours creeping through enemy terrain, avoiding checkpoints and sensors. They reached the target site and got the asset out clean. Flawless operation until the trap was sprung. The enemy had been ready. Too precise, too efficient. Their route, schedule, and goal had been sold out. The extraction turned into a slaughter in under a minute. 6 teammates dead in 30 seconds. 9. The prisoner, a journalist who had exposed brutal truths, took cover behind ruined concrete while gunfire tore the world apart. She had 2 options: escape and survive, or carry the mission through with no support and no chance. She picked the impossible. 3 hours of relentless street fighting, ducking from ruins to smoke, dragging a man who couldn't walk or even lift a weapon. Her comms were dead, backup weapons gone, survival down to 0, but she got him out, reached the alternate pickup site where a chopper hovered, loaded him aboard, then held off the enemy from a crumbling rooftop under a hail of gunfire. The bird couldn't come back for her. Too dangerous, too exposed, she knew. She'd given the order herself. Some missions accept a cost, but she hadn't been lost. 4 days later, she crossed into friendly ground on foot, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. The debrief took 6 hours. Every scrap of that mission had been documented, examined, then locked away under layers of top-level clearance. What followed was red tape at its worst. Operation Phoenix variant never officially existed. The man they'd pulled out couldn't be named. The fallen couldn't be honored. And Nina Rohr's bravery, it couldn't be celebrated without exposing state secrets. So instead, they sent her to Redmond Base with a fake disciplinary file. Tactical blunders, friendly fire casualties, just enough fact to seem real. Just enough fiction to wreck her name. Now she scrubbed floors and sorted inventory, while armchair warriors questioned whether she ever deserved the uniform. The irony choked, punished for a success too classified to acknowledge, stripped of respect for saving a life that couldn't be mentioned. One day, deep in the warehouse, she found an old set of maps marked for disposal. Military layouts from retired missions. Mostly outdated, mostly declassified. But one map made her stop cold. Its grid was marked with the same angular shapes as her tattoo, the very same lines, the same phoenix with geometric wings. It wasn't coincidence. It was proof. Covert ops no one had ever admitted took place. She snapped a photo and sent it to a number she hadn't used in over a year. "They still don't recognize the emblem," she typed. "How long do I wait?" The reply came fast. "Patience, truth builds momentum. Let it gather." But patience was costing her. Each day chipped away another piece of her dignity. More fuel for the doubters who saw her as broken. The rumors had settled into truth now. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was a warning. The one who cracked. The one who failed. That afternoon, a few junior soldiers followed her into the supply building. Phones out. Tick-tock time, they called it, filming at her expense. "Yo, drop out," one yelled. "Show us that famous retreat maneuver." They shoved crates, dumped grease on her uniform, and laughed while she cleaned it in silence. The clips would go viral by dinner, edited, hashtagged, humiliating. Lieutenant Carter saw it from the doorway, his face rigid. He'd been told not to get involved in internal discipline. But this wasn't just hazing. It was abuse. Still, speaking up meant stepping on the wrong toes. To question what people thought about Nina Rohr was to risk your own career. So he stayed put, witnessing something that betrayed everything he'd promised to defend. That night he couldn't sleep. He started digging into her tattoo's origin. Military records, deep databases, old blacked-out files just barely within his clearance. Hours of research gave him slivers. Mentions of ops no one admitted happened. Teams with no names. Objectives completed by ghosts. The fragments formed something. But the image they painted, it defied belief. Ever seen someone condemned before they had a chance to speak? If you have, share that memory. Someone might need to hear it. General Myron Keene's inspection visits were infamous. You never saw them coming. 4 decades in uniform had taught General Myron Keene that the biggest failures often hid behind routines too comfortable to question. And comfort, he'd learned, was the mortal enemy of combat readiness. Redmond Base didn't expect him back for another half year, so when he showed up unannounced, the place erupted into barely contained panic. Hastily assembled formations, rushed gear checks, and frantic efforts to fake perfection with 0 prep time. Nina Rohr wasn't called up. Supply crew never made inspection lines, especially not ones with black marks in their file. She stayed on task, sorting equipment inside the warehouse while the rest of the base buzzed with nerves. But General Keene didn't do inspections by the book. He strolled the grounds, looked people in the eye, asked questions no one wanted to answer. Years of field command had taught him that truth liked the shadows, not the parade ground. His route wasn't mapped out. He wandered past garages, offices, armories, and bunkhouses. Each spot told its own story, most of them conflicting with the glowing reports he'd reviewed. The warehouse, according to schedule, was supposed to be deserted. Instead, he spotted a lone figure moving with quiet focus, setting up crates for an upcoming exercise. Her movements were efficient, almost too sharp for her rank. There was precision in her rhythm, the kind that comes from battlefield experience, not clerical training. He paused near the bay door, studying her without saying a word. Veterans moved a certain way, not with stiffness, but with gravity. And this woman carried that weight. He stepped closer, still watching. There's no glory in inventory, but the way she handled it, tight process, zero sloppiness, spoke volumes, every label right, every item where it belonged. Then she reached overhead. Her sleeve slipped back. That's when he saw it. The ink froze him mid-step. That symbol, black lines wrapping an angular phoenix etched with the kind of detail only mission-grade tattoos carry. He'd seen that emblem before, not on anyone's arm, but in hush-hush briefings behind locked doors. Mission so secret even generals needed special clearance just to know they'd happened. He raised his voice, quiet but commanding. Sergeant Nina turned sharply, snapping to attention with the kind of speed that didn't belong to warehouse workers. That wasn't reflex. That was conditioning. Combat deep. Where did you get that mark, he asked. The question cut through 2 years of buried truth. For the first time since her transfer, Nina met an officer's eyes without flinching. Her voice held firm. Tier 6 Phoenix variant, 7 in, 1 out. Everything stilled. Even the ambient hum of drills and motors outside seemed to mute. General Keene's expression shifted fast from suspicion to realization, to something close to reverence. He remembered Phoenix variant. He'd seen the reports, eyes-only files that mentioned a mission so precise, so risky, it had changed the course of a regional war. A mission accomplished by shadows, their names redacted even from victory. Lieutenant Carter. He barked at the young officer, telling him, I need this soldier's file, not the standard record, the black archive. Carter nodded, caught off guard, then sprinted off, his mind racing. Black archive meant intel operations. Stuff that lived behind 10 layers of clearance and access logs no junior officer ever touched. The order spread across Redmond Base like fire through dry brush. The general had recognized that emblem on the washout's arm, and suddenly those same soldiers who'd mocked Nina for months were finding excuses to vanish, unwilling to be linked to the judgment they once threw so freely. Within the hour, Lieutenant Carter returned, holding a file stamped with security clearances he hadn't even known existed. General Keene read in silence, his expression hardening with every page. The truth was brutal in its clarity. Nina Rohr wasn't disgraced. She was one of their best, buried by bureaucracy to shield secrets. The failure pinned to her name was fiction, crafted to mask her reassignment from missions that couldn't be mentioned. But the lie had grown legs, fed by silence and the assumptions of people who should have known better. Officers who should have asked questions. Instead, they joined the crowd, using the myth to excuse cruelty. Sergeant Rohr, Keene's voice echoed through the warehouse, stepped forward. She moved with quiet precision. Not the hesitant step of someone beaten down, but the sure gait of a soldier reporting for duty. Her posture, her eyes, her silence. Everything about her radiated discipline, resolve, honor. I owe you an apology, Keene said aloud, his words carrying across the gathering. This entire institution does. While you kept our secret safe, we failed to protect your name. Around them, soldiers who had gathered, despite knowing they weren't supposed to, shifted uneasily, their comfortable assumptions collapsing under the weight of facts they could no longer deny. Lieutenant Carter stepped toward her, his voice small but earnest. Sir, I saw what they did. I should have acted. I should have asked more questions. You should have believed a fellow soldier. Keene cut in, scanning the group. All of you should have. Footage from the warehouse incident had already hit the net. Clips of Nina covered in grease and insults, stoically enduring while her peers watched in silence. The videos were undeniable. The fallout came fast. Advocacy groups, veteran circles, and civilians lit up the feeds demanding answers. The story of how the military treated one of its own, once considered expendable, had gone viral. A PR disaster, a moral reckoning. But for Nina, standing among the ruins of the lie, the justice felt distant. Her name was cleared, But nothing could refund the years of being alone, the hours spent swallowing shame in silence. Some victories don't feel like wins, or maybe they mean more because of the pain they follow. 3 weeks later, the military held a closed-door recognition. No press, no fanfare, just facts finally brought to light inside a secure conference room built for classified briefings. General Keene stood again, reading from a document sealed in silence for too long. Sergeant First Class Nina Rohr displayed extraordinary courage during Operation Phoenix Variant, executing the extraction of a critical asset under hostile conditions. Her actions prevented a wider conflict and upheld the core values of military service. Nina stood tall in her formal uniform, sharp and spotless despite having asked not to be there. No stage, no salute, no return of rank. Some injuries don't need witnesses. But the military needed this moment to face what it broke and name what it failed to honor. Your record is now corrected, Keene announced. All charges erased. Your commendations reinstated, including the Defense Superior Service Medal and the Bronze Star with Valor. She accepted the medals quietly, her hands steady. They were heavier than they looked. Not for what they weighed, but for what they cost. 2 years of silence, shame, and isolation. The cost of guarding secrets that others never had to think about. Lieutenant Carter had asked to speak. His voice trembled as he addressed her, eyes fixed on the floor. Sergeant Rohr, I saw what happened to you and I failed to intervene. I neglected my responsibility as both an officer and a decent person. I offer a formal apology and will accept any consequences you see fit. She turned to him, really saw him for the first time since that day in the warehouse, young, sincere, carrying a weight he'd bear for years. Maybe the guilt would sharpen him into the kind of leader the next soldier in need could count on, if he didn't let it break him first. Apology accepted. Lieutenant, remember this. Protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Her voice held no bitterness. Asked for no retribution, just tired truth and a hope that failure might still lead to something useful. The ceremony closed with orders no one expected. Instead of returning to Black Ops or transferring out, Nina requested to join the Warrior Transition Unit, the place where wounded soldiers learn to live again. General Keene hesitated. Sergeant, that's not where someone with your record belongs. SOCOM wants you back immediately. With respect, sir, I've spent 2 years knowing what it feels like to be abandoned. That experience might be useful to someone else. He approved the request, recognizing the strength in her choice. Sometimes the best medics were the ones who knew what survival really cost. Her story, though sealed by official silence, leaked into the public anyway. The reaction was immediate. Hashtags, news stories, hearings, demands for reform in how the military handled internal justice. Real change started creeping in through the noise. Even Corporal Voss, the one who'd once jeered at her on the ropes, sent a letter to her new post neatly written. Honest Sergeant Rohr, I called you a failure when you were saving lives I'll never know about. I don't expect anything from this note, but your story changed how I understand bravery. It's not glory in combat. It's standing your ground when everything's against you and still protecting others. She never wrote back, but she kept the letter. Not for pride, but for proof that people could shift, that even the worst chapters could become lessons. Hope bound in ink. 6 months later, the military launched the Silent Emblem Project, a force-wide initiative to identify and honor service members whose contributions had been hidden beneath classification codes. Files reopened, histories corrected, names remembered. Families finally told the truth about their missing years. Recognition delayed but not erased. Nana's tattoo became a symbol for the effort. Quiet, angular, unmistakable. Other soldiers started posting images of their own. The patches, the coins, the unspoken markers of service that never made it into books. But maybe the bigger shift was cultural. Redmond Base changed its policies. Disciplinary reviews now required oversight. Bias training became mandatory. Harassment could be reported anonymously. Lieutenant Carter, promoted after publicly admitting his failures, emerged as a strong voice for reform. His path rebuilt, grounded in the lessons he'd learned watching someone stand alone. The system wasn't fixed, not fully. Change came slow, scraping against decades of rusted habits. But it had started because now they understood. Courage didn't always come with medals or headlines. Sometimes it walked quiet halls. Sometimes it wore grease-stained fadings and kept silent for 2 long years. And sometimes it changed everything. Some victories were about correcting the record. Others were about making sure the same failure never happened again. Both counted. 1 year later, the ROR Legacy Training Program launched at the Special Warfare Center. Its insignia, a stylized phoenix rising from a web of geometric shapes, the same symbol that had once exposed 2 years of institutional blindness. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, now head of the Ethics Training Division, stood before the program's first class. Junior officers from every branch, ready to teach lessons that hadn't existed in any manual until now. "This course exists because we failed," he began. "We failed to see excellence behind misunderstood silence. We failed to challenge the easy story. We failed to stand up for the ones who carried the burden when no one else could." The young lieutenants and captains shifted uncomfortably. Military education usually celebrated heroics, not systemic breakdown. But this was different. It had to be. Sergeant First Class Rohr chose not to instruct the course herself. Carter added, "She told me her story isn't the point. The point is what it teaches. Character doesn't reveal itself during applause. It shows up when no one's clapping." In a quiet corner of Colorado, far from any base or bureaucracy, Nina Rohr ran a transition center, small, discreet, and supported by anonymous funding from people who didn't want their names known. Her clients were special operations veterans, those who lived in shadows, worked without recognition, and carried wounds from missions no one would ever acknowledge. They found her through whispers, old favors, or a quiet nod from someone who knew where to look. No fancy treatments, no slogans, just presence, listening, stability from someone who understood what isolation really meant. One afternoon, a young woman arrived. Army Ranger, maybe 24. Polished record, glowing reviews, but her eyes told another story. Something unseen. "I read what happened to you," she said during the intake. "How you made it through, people believing the worst about you. I think I need someone who understands that." Nah. Didn't say much, just pulled back her sleeve. "Let the ink speak. Not to prove anything, but to signal understanding. Tell me what you can't tell anyone else," she said. That night, as cold swept through the mountains, Na sat with other vets by a fire behind the center. They spoke the kind of stories no press would print, no medals would ever mention. Each night, those fires became more than warmth. They became confession, connection, a circle of survivors trading memories and grace. These weren't group sessions. They were lifelines. Here, the silence didn't isolate. It united. Her phone buzzed. Secure line. No ID. New referral. Navy SEAL, 3 tours. All places that don't officially exist. Nah. Looked at the message for a moment, then stood and went inside to prepare. Another shadow had found its way home. "Sounds familiar," she typed back. "One bed open. Send the coordinates when ready." The center didn't exist on any official registry. No database entries, no brochures. It operated quietly, fueled by off-the-record donations and whispered referrals, just like the missions that had shaped those who came through its doors. Hidden but vital, out of sight yet deeply felt, its reach stretched far beyond Colorado. Veterans who found their footing there returned home stronger, steadier, better prepared to live again. Their healing spread into families, workplaces, entire communities. Later that night, when the fire pit was down to glowing ash and the others had gone inside, Nana walked the perimeter, just habit, just old reflexes that kept her alert, making sure things were secure, that everyone inside was safe. The mountain air was clear and still, so unlike the watchful, pressurized atmosphere of the bases she'd once lived on. Here, no one measured her against standards built by people who'd never faced no-win decisions. Her phone buzzed one last time. A message from General Keene. Retired now, but still watching out for the ones who'd borne the cost. "Heard about your center. Congressional hearing next month on justice reform. Your testimony could move the needle." She stared at the message for a while, then answered simply, "Better to serve from the shadows. Let the reforms speak for themselves. Some wins are televised, recorded, etched into history. Others, they're quiet. They happen behind fences in the mountains, whispered in safe rooms, passed from hand to hand, but they matter just the same." The tattoo on her arm caught a sliver of moonlight. The angles and lines seemed to shift in the dark. A symbol not just of pain, but of what it takes to survive broken systems and come out whole. Tomorrow would bring new stories, new scars, new names, looking for steady ground. But tonight, surrounded by stillness and mountain air and the slow, certain rhythm of healing, Nina Rohr was exactly where she needed to be. In the quiet, in the dark, where the real work gets done, where heroes live, where they come back. Where are you watching from? Have you ever seen dignity returned in silence? Share your place in the moment. We're building a map of quiet victories,